much like the way you're wired. I think it's meat and potatoes. Obviously, tons of analytics these days, but I think he found a way to get to these guys. So be interesting how this plays
Yeah,
out.
you got to be careful with analytics. Like I was asked about,
Yeah,
and I do. There's some things that there's information as a coach you want, but then there's a lot of pages where you just want to throw it away, right?
burn
So
it.
you just gotta kind of dive into some stuff, but you can't manage or coach the game or manage your team on all analytics. I think it's dangerous, but there is a place for it, no question.
Yeah, I agree. It can be very dangerous. There's a fine line there, like you said, because I coached with the Phantoms for 7 years, and it got heavy analytics. Probably even more now, but it's breaking the game apart way too much, in my opinion. And there's nothing that really kind of gets past the old eye test, right? The energy test that you really can't quantify, right? So, but there's pieces there; they're valuable, no doubt.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
And it seems like if you don't get the coaching job you want, it seems like a natural transition. Not that it needs to be a long-term play. I mean, but it's something to keep you in the game, stay visible. You're still talking hockey and having some fun, right? I mean,
Right.
and I've heard you speak before about assistant coaching jobs versus head coaching jobs, and you want a head coaching job, right? I mean, you're a head coach now, and the assistant served its purpose, probably as a learning tool and whatnot. But there's only there's only a handful of coaching jobs that come up every year, so it's a tough thing.
Right. But I will tell you, and I've been a head coach and stuff, and I've been a player. Assistant coach's role is huge, and they put little fires up for the head coaches. So
Yeah,
I take that very serious. Assistant coaching. I remember I was in Pittsburgh with Mike Sullivan. It was great. So your job is to help the head coach. So he deals with a lot of pressures and stuff, and if you can be there to put little fires out, deal with the players, and help them out. So it's a huge job, and those guys grind. I mean, you were there. You're an assistant coach. You grind every day. And I see you've seen all the assistant coaches. You've been part of the Flyers for 25 years. How many assistant coaches do you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of a job where, you got to earn the trust of the players. I always tell the story. I was in Pittsburgh, and early on in my assistant coach role there, and I remember I was talking to Crosby, and I said, "Hey, Sid, the day you guys started calling me a pigeon, I will quit." I said, no player will ever call me a pigeon, man. I will quit. Because we used to, as players, there'd be some assistant coaches, and we say this guy's a pigeon.
Yeah, right.
And I said, he laughed, and I'm not going to name the guy, but I don't really explode too much as an assistant coach on the bench. And this one guy, I didn't get along with him the first couple of months. He's a very good hockey player, and we just didn't hit it off. And he came off one time, and Sully told me to go talk to this guy because he did something wrong. And I went to, and really respectfully, and I go to the guy, "Hey, man, it's man on man during 4-on-4," and he started motherfucking me right on the bench, and that was my aha moment. Like, all the players are watching this. Do I take this and then I become a pigeon, or do I go? And I just lit into this guy, and couple of guys had to get in between me, and the guy didn't want no part of me. But the next day, the guy came up to me, the player, and apologized. And since then, we've been, very good friends since. So,
that's awesome.
Sometimes you got those aha moments where you got to make a decision, and that was my pigeon moment. I didn't want to be a pigeon in that situation.
No, who does?
Yeah, right.
No, but there's a fine line there. Yeah, right. I mean, it's easy to be kind of maybe falling into that category where you don't get the respect you deserve, right? Because you're not the head guy. But it's such an important job. It really is. Like you said, like you're that bridge between the head coach. You got to bring out the oven mitts sometimes and get these guys feeling comfortable. And
right.
You know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff that goes in on it behind the scenes that most fans and people don't see, but it's important.
And listen, I don't know, right? Like, we're an emotional. It's an emotional game. Like, so I have no. Listen, I don't care if a player comes off and gets mad at me or and respectfully, gives it to you. Like, you can say to a player, "Hey," he comes off, and he might yell, "Hey, that's not my man," or blah blah. Start screaming. I get it. I've been there before, but I've never really. It's funny. Who was I talking the other day? And he said, I forget the player. He said that he has told a coach to fuck off. I've never told a coach to fuck off. Like, turn around and say, "Go." I've never done that in my career. I might have got mad. I might have went after Mike Keenan a couple of times, but other than that, no, I was always respectful in that way, but I have no problem a player getting upset and being mad at your coach. That's okay. It's part of the game. It's
right, for sure.
It's a tough sport.
Yeah. And there's a difference between just being emotional and telling your coach to fuck off, right? I mean, that's like, in my opinion, crossing the line of a deliberate lack of respect. Like, you can still control your emotions enough to just whatever, just be angry or whatever, but not cross that line.
And most of the guys, if they do, the next day they apologize. Like,
right.
So it's water under the bridge. I'm not a guy that keeps things personal. So,
right.
And I know a lot of coaches, Chief and Travis Green or Buddy Mize, and they're the same way. They say the same. If a player gets out of, usually the next day they apologize. You know?
For sure. Yeah. As far as your coaching goes, I mean, I know you're, under the guise of a player's coach. I mean, you communicate well. You seem like a simple guy, just as far as philosophy goes. But, going back to when you played, you had some hard coaches. I mean, it was a little different philosophy, obviously, the way coaches communicate with the players. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about like that ancient way of coaching versus like the more modern way is communication and how it is in NHL?
Yeah. Yeah, my first coach, Mike Keenan, he really helped me my career. Like I love the guy, but there's also and I don't like using the word hate, but there's some times where I really despised him, right? But that was his way. He probably could, I've always said this, and we've talked to Mike. He probably wouldn't be able to do the same tactics nowadays. Back then, nowadays, probably not. But he got the most of it. We've had some legendary brouhahas, me and him. But he was ahead of his time. He's the guy that started the short 40-minute high tempo practices. Everybody got their own water bottle with their number on. Like, he started all that. Team dinners. Like, I remember the 80s, wow. Derek, your dad will tell him, we used to have 1 million team dinners. Like, I had buddies on other teams; they never had team meals. So, that was the Flyers' philosophy. Obviously, Mike had a team credit card. So, you win 4 or 5 in a row, we'd give the guys a credit, go to a bar or something. So Mike knew how to do that stuff, but also, when it's business, boy, he was tough. He'd get on a guy. I remember he skated Scott Mellanby in the Montreal Forum. He had Scotty go from blue line to blue line, and so we had to do it 6 times with about a 10-second rate. You got to remember, Scotty was going to play that night. This was a morning skate. And for about 20 minutes, and Scotty finally, he was down. And I went to give him water, and he slashed the water bottle in my hand. And Scotty played that night, and he was my roommate. Scotty slept all afternoon. I think Scotty might have got a couple assists or something. We beat Montreal. But it was just his way, right? He did that to me a couple times. And then, then you move up to guys like Scotty Bowman, didn't talk to him much. That was just Scotty, but behind the bench, taskmaster. He's a hockey savant, right? He just knew who to put together at the right time. He's a genius behind the bench, but he wasn't a guy that communicated well in the sense that. But I really enjoyed playing for him. Jim Schoenfeld, I really like Jim. Like, he was like a father figure, big guy. He was a good coach for me too. So those guys I really enjoyed playing for. Because they all had different approaches of dealing with players or coaching your team. Yeah. And today's game, I look at, I love talking to Chief and Travis Green, and I talked to John Cooper, pick his brain. There's certain guys that you like to, Spuddy Gallant I talked to the other day. So there's a fraternity there where you pick their brains. Hey, in these situations, what do you think? And, they're good enough friends to share their ideas. So that's what I try to understand what, all these different coaches, what they do.
Yeah. And there's more of like an actual conversation going on with the player and coach versus back in the day. I guess it's more like coach, whatever the coach says goes.
Right.
Dialogue and, obviously the technologies now, there's so much breakdown, and you text the guy, talk about goals that are happening in the NHL and stuff like that. So that it allows that. But I feel like there's just more dialogue. There's a little bit more of listening to the player versus just, talking to the player. That's at least from what I saw, anyways. And
you're dead on, Riley. Dead on. It's I call it a partnership. You're a partner. Like, it's not a dictatorship. Yeah, I'm the head coach, and excuse me, there's a lot of decisions I have to make. But at the end of the day, man, it's a partnership. Hey boys, we're going to do this kind of forecheck, blah blah blah, and you might have a guy pick up, raise his hand or call you. Hey, listen, why can't we have F3 play a little bit closer to the far post, like when we come on our forecheck? And you got to listen to them because they have good points, right?
Yeah.
Now, at the end of the day, I mean, the head coach has the final decision, and hopefully everybody respects it and does it. but definitely there's a partnership and the way you deal with players. The one thing I really can appreciate is I played every role in hockey. I was a fourth line guy, third liner, second and a first liner. I was a guy that didn't dress some games. So I kind of understand everybody's position. Maybe some other coaches don't, a guy that doesn't play, he's one injury or one guy being out. And I've had some guys over my career that didn't play, but they were major reasons why we won a Stanley Cup. They scored a winning goal or they blocked a shot. So it's important for the coach to make sure that they have time for those type of guys too. It's just not, hey, you can sit and talk to Sidney Crosby for 2 hours all day, but if you're not you're not in the room there or on the ice with the other guys, I mean, you're affecting their career too. So I take that very personal to help guys, stay in the league, but also be part of a winning team.
Way back when you were in Tampa, which seems like forever ago. And it was I remember the one day, you ended up being a head coach there. And, but I remember coming to play you guys, and Tiro Ninemaki was there, and I was tight he played with Riley. And
sure. Yeah.
Nitty was I love Nitty. He was just so funny and good dude. So I think you had, was it Wes Walls, one of your coaches, and Otzi. So I see Nitty, I'm coming in, I see Nitty, he's like going to the ice. So I kind of go to your bench, the Tampa Bay bench, and he's sitting down and we're talking, and Walls is just whipping around the ice, just buzzing. Like, I don't know why. He's just skating around, he's fucking shooting biscuits. And then you see Otzi, he's got a few of the boys out there early, and he's like in his spot where he used to feed Hall and Cam Neely. So I'm kind of watching all this, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. And I'm like, who's that? He goes, oh, he goes, Wes Walls. He goes, he thinks he's better than every player on the team. Like, he basically says that. And I said, well, he can fucking fly. I said, I know who he is, and he goes, oh yeah, he goes, and Otzi over here, he thinks he's passing to Cam Neely in the Garden for one-timers. He says that's exactly what he thinks he's doing. I don't think he realizes. I was dying, man. But I was just going to ask you, I know it was kind of I don't want to say shit show, but a shit show. The ownership, everything was kind of crazy there. What was that like for you? And Stammer was a kid, literally a kid.
Yeah. It's funny. Like, the two head coaching stints is, the ownership has been a little bit, I don't want to say unstable, but it's kind of like, that's why I appreciate being, going to Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, teams with just great ownership, right? So it didn't have, and the first star of that whole franchise is Jeffrey Vinik, the new owner that went in. He's the guy that fired me, but he's done a hell of a job. I know he brought Stevie Yzerman in, and then they drafted, Vasilevsky and all those guys, and
right.
The rest is history. But yeah, it's hard. And Riley, as a player, when you have a lot of outside noise, it's really hard as a player and a coach to keep that noise out. You try, and I know in Arizona, the players did a great job of keeping the noise outside. A couple of ownership changes and a couple of GM changes, and it's your job is to try to keep the team focused. But yeah, I mean, the good thing with Stamkos, I remember we had Gary Robertson. He was, at the end of his career, but he was a workout freak. Great guy, Robs. And I remember Stammer, he was kind of strong. He's a skinny guy. And I said to Stammer, I called him in one day and I talked to his agent. I said, listen, I'm going to play him 2 of every 3 games or 3 of every 5 games. And the games he doesn't play, we're going to get him in the gym. We got to get him stronger. We got to get his core stronger. Got to get some muscle on his ass and his legs so he doesn't get, tossed around. And I'll tell you, near the end of the year, he was scoring goals, and you could see him coming. The next year, he scored 50 goals. So,
yeah.
The one thing I was proud of our staff, and we made that decision. Hey, we're going to do this to the first pick. We might have got criticized, but in the long run, you can ask Stammer was the best thing for him. So that was one thing I was proud about, is doing that. And obviously, Stamkos has scored 1 million goals since then. I'm not saying because of that, but I think for him getting stronger and not trying to force him to play every game, even though we weren't a good team.
Right.
Yeah, that's a ballsy decision. I think Stammer's still working with Gary Roberts too, if I'm correct. I mean, he obviously built a relationship there, but I think that's probably one of the biggest things when you get young guys, 18 years old, coming out of juniors, is the strength, right? And if they don't have that man strength, if you want to call it that, there's only one way to really get it is to put the work in, right? I mean, you can play all the games in the world, but I mean, you're going to go through 82 games, and then you're not really getting any stronger during the season. But that's a pretty interesting little fact there, because he probably didn't want to hear that at the time, but make him a better player in the long run.
Well, you got to remember, these guys are coming to you, and they're playing 30 minutes a night in junior, and they're getting 2 goals a game, right? So it's hard for them to understand that, but he took it like he understood. His agent was really good at the time. Said, "Yeah, we understand." And today's players, same thing. It's I was telling Mike Johnson asked me to talk to Portland Winterhawks this was last year, and sometimes I do that in a Zoom call with players. I just said to him, like, even for the top guys, the guys that score 60 goals in junior every year or 50, like, you got to make sure you have another like club in the bag. You just can't come in and I'm a goal scorer and that's it, because there's some players that were big scorers in junior and they don't score like that in the NHL. They might be just become 15 goal scorers, but they worked on their defensive part of the game, or the great face-off guy, or unreal penalty killer. So you better have another tool in the bag. You're just going to rely on, hey, I'm a shooter and a scorer, and which I understand that's your forte, but you better have something else in that bag, because if you can't score and the other parts of your game are lacking, you're probably not going to be in the NHL that long.
Yeah, that's so true, and I've seen that a lot when I was coaching the minors. There is the guys have that mentality where, like, I was that go-to guy, and then all of a sudden they're playing in a more of a distinct role on the third and fourth line, and they have a hard time because they haven't been trained, or they haven't put any pride into playing the defensive side of the game, or really said, like, doing something extra above and beyond just scoring goals. And you're going up against the best goal scorers in the world. You better be a damn good goal scorer if you're going to be on those top 2 lines and try and think you're going to put up 50 a year.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. It's interesting dynamic. I think coaching is, especially as assistant coach, as we talked about earlier, is just like a lot of psychology, right? It's just a lot of like conversations about, like, well, there's an ego component, but there's also this getting over the hurdle of you got to bring more to the table every single day, because if you're not scoring, what are you doing? And if you're not doing that, then you're probably not in the lineup, and you probably line up in the back into the minor leagues. But a lot of psychology, because you got to get these guys to think a different way, because when you're in that bubble, like, not that I scored 60 goals in junior, but close to 30. And to get breaking out of that mold of, like, holy shit, like, I'm going up against some serious goal scorers here, and I can't just, like, rely on thinking that I'm actually a good offensive player. So right. It's hard for guys to wrap their head around, because it's a blow to their pride a little bit. But I think the guys that take it the best are the guys that have evolved the most. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. You're true. And the psychologies, I always tell this story. I don't know if you guys heard of it before. Like, with Phil, I was pitching with Phil Kessel. He's the beauty. I love that guy. He's a different guy, and the reason everybody loves him, because he's got a different personality. I mean, you don't want everybody to have the same personality to be a boring team, right?
Right.
So I just remember Phil. He's eating Bray's grumping about something the night before, and that's just Phil. And I go, "Come on, Phil, let's go." Right in the office, and he goes, "All right," and he used to call me Ricky, like, in front of, "All right, Ricky, let's go watch video," right? So
all right, Ricky.
So I said, "Great." He doesn't eat eggs, So he eats the omelet, everything but the eggs. So he's got his bacon and ham and all there, and I go, "Bring it with you." So we're sitting down, and what do you got for me? And then he starts grumping, and you guys aren't playing me enough, and I'm letting him vent, right? This and this, and I said, "Listen, man," I said, you have to have a good practice day. You had, the last couple of practices, you're kind of loafing up there. He goes, "Oh, come on, man." And then I could see him getting, like, a little pissed, not so much at me, just everything. And on purpose, I had the ESPN on. They have that World Series of Poker on ESPN too sometimes.
Yeah.
So I knew he was getting antsy, and I just go, "Phil, look, did you see that? What happened last night with Phil Ivey or something? I don't know. I made something." He goes, "Yeah, did you see that? The guy had, the guy overplayed his kings," and he starts talking poker with me, right? And he's a big poker guy, right? And he's good. And I used to play poker, and I know poker pretty well. So we had a conversation for about 2-3 minutes about it. And then I told, I think, was it Jacques Martin? I said, "Knock on my door," about 10 minutes in. And Jacques, "Hey, talk. We have a meeting with Sully." And I go, Phil, man, I got to go. I got to go to the office. And so now I got him down because he's all happy about poker, right?
Right.
And I go, Phil, you're gonna work today? Probably, yeah. Okay, talk. I'll work hard today or whatever. So you got to. The reason I'm saying you got to get these guys on a different level sometimes and think of other ways. And I remember Phil in practice was unreal. And I remember Sully goes, "What'd you talk about?" I said, "Poker."
Yeah, right. Jeez.
How do you play kings against aces? I said, So he started laughing.
He started
that
laughing.
was Phil, man. He scored some big goals for the Penguins. I'll tell you that. And,
no kidding.
But yeah, you got to deal with different players' personalities. We all have different personalities, and we're not all the same. I don't want 21 Rick Tocchet's, to be honest with you, no way. But you don't want 21 Phil Kessel's. But if you sprinkle everybody in there, you can get a good dynamic in a room.